In the aftermath of World War I and the Spanish flu pandemic, the devastation of life, culture, and economics was akin to a global forest fire. While irreparable and indescribable damage and suffering was inflicted, what was left behind was a metaphorical clearing, a gap for green shoots to reach for the light of the sun. Delicate sprouting leaves that would have previously struggled in the shade of crowded canopies were gifted an opportunity to get a head start in life. How can you position yourself to take advantage of the post-COVID landscape and take part in the 21st century's roaring 20s? We're going to discuss that and more right now. Hi, you're listening to The Fight Coach, The Psychotherapist and The Gym Mama. FCPGM is a weekly podcast where we discuss important topics that affect you and your family and tips we suggest that might just help you out. On today's episode, we're discussing the roaring 20s and the lessons we might be able to learn from 100 years ago. As per usual, I'm joined by James White of API Clinics, a psychotherapist well versed in the world of mental health, stress management and anxiety.
How's it going?
Marlene Griffin, aka the Gym Mama, a parent of 3 and owner-manager of a busy martial arts and fitness gym and a lifelong martial artist.
Hi there.
My name is Liam Griffin. I'm a professional MMA coach with a background in e-learning and engineering. If you'd like to follow along with us using our show notes, you can get them at www.fcpgm.com. There you'll find links to our Facebook community page, our Twitter feed, and our Discord server. If you'd like to join the conversation and add your experience and feedback, we'd love to hear from you. So, let's begin.
It's cool being back, isn't it?
Yep, I was just about to say it.
Yeah, new
We are
studio. Thanks to Kevin O'Sullivan. Trident Inc. Actually, great job. So it's really exciting.
So we were on a bit of a sabbatical. Let's kind of explain a little bit about that first. We had, obviously, the first 29 episodes were like once a week, and we were very on top of it, and we had the whole thing roaring. Not to pun on today's topic, but the third lockdown kind of put a bit of a kibosh on it for us because we had lots of live guests planned and we couldn't get them into the studio. And it kind of killed the momentum for us, and then we had to kind of pivot and do a few other things as well just to keep the gym doors open. So, but we're back, and all of those guests that we did have lined up for January will be on the podcast in the coming weeks, and lots to come. But today's topic is all about the roaring 20s. So I'm going to hand the microphone to Mara here for a second and give us a little bit of a feedback or a little bit of a introduction. What the hell is the roaring 20s?
Well, the roaring 20s equates to a time back in 1920. Where after the First World War, after the Spanish flu, there was an explosion economically, industrial, financially. It was driven by, I suppose, after the pandemic that like this, we're all locked down. So there's people who want to get out and they want to shop. So it was driven by consumer spending power. It was driven by people who wanted to go to the cinema, people who wanted to get out and hug and meet people, and who wanted actually to see sports. So it was a boom, and I keep referring to it. We actually kind of tipped on it in one of our podcasts last year when we were talking about lockdown. We were talking about like how fantastic things come out of lockdown eventually, and like, so the roaring 20s, it's been my tagline, I suppose, every time I'm feeling down or whatever. No, it's going to be roaring 20s. I need to be ready for the roaring 20s. And, I'm delighted because I've read so many articles, even in the last 2 months, and they refer to it. But I have a trademarked Ask John Kavanagh. That's my one.
So there was a lot of good stuff that happened throughout the 20s, as you said. The whole kind of cultural revolutions of jazz music. You had
The women got the vote.
the suffrage movement, and that was both in the US and the UK. There was a lot of cool things that came out of it. There was also a lot of negatives that came out of it. There was there was the rise of the Ku Klux Klan over in the States. There was the rise of fascism in Central Europe. It led to a later era of Nazism in Germany, obviously.
And the Great Depression.
And the Great Depression of the 30s. So it's not all good. There was some other stuff in there. Jimmy, do you have an insight into what was happening with regards to global mental health around about the 20s?
So on the back, as Mara said, on the back of World War One and on the back of the coming through the Spanish flu and stuff, people were in a, even though it's a different situation to us right now, but effectively there was no freedom. So people were scared. They were obviously hearing bombs going off, deaths all around them, families, their own personal families going off to war and stuff. So from a mental point of view, if we talk about the brain for a moment, there's a part of our brain which is involved in protecting us as a species. Each individual person has a certain part of their brain that looks after this, and we call it in my profession the amygdala, or it's in the limbic system of the brain, and its pure job is to help us survive no matter what's going on. The problem with it is it's got three reactions to how that happens, and one is fight, the other is flight, and the other is freeze, which you would hear in martial arts circumstances as well. So you're either fighting against what's going on, you're running away from what's going on, or you're just putting up what's going on and sort of being very passive in that scenario. So back then, because everything was like full of doom and gloom in regards to what was going on in the whole world from different perspectives, it was very much a case of there was no light at the end of the tunnel. There was no hope. Was the world going to end? All of those questions were coming into people. Will I ever get back to normal? Similar to what's happening for us and has been happening for us the last year. However, once there's sort of a glimmer of excitement, then the brain starts to release serotonin and dopamine, which are called the happy chemicals. And therefore, you can start to see there's a little bit of hope, there's a little bit of excitement, there's a little bit of fun. Oh, are we going to get we're going to be happy again? So it's like that, you know, that saying that people say, this too shall pass. But you don't see that till it's nearly there. Do you know what I mean? When you're in the middle of it, you don't see that whatsoever. And someone saying that your brain isn't comprehending it because it just wants you to survive and goes into sort of a lockdown itself, you know? So from a mental perspective, once they started seeing, like you said, the Hollywood movies started coming out, celebrities became a thing. I think the actual movie star was the word that actually arose in the 1920s, and it filtered from the States over to here into Europe and stuff. So people began to see, oh, okay, things are looking up, and then they go mental, totally mental. Like it's like a greyhound in the traps. As soon as that rabbit goes past or that hare goes past, it's out running like a dart. And that's where in can lie the problem, as in regards to, say, the negative stuff or the unbeneficial stuff that happened. So we need to be aware of that.
So let's just kind of recap on some of the trends that did emerge out of the 20s. You spoke already about the movie stars, Hollywood.
Big stadiums of
stadiums.
Sport.
Television,
okay.
Radio stations became much more bigger. Frozen foods.
Okay.
Industrialization, where and for the benefit as well, because like during pandemics, we'll say when you look back in London when you had the cholera, after the cholera pandemic, what happened then was that people started investing on a huge infrastructure. So, today we can go into the bathroom and we can sit there reading or whatever we do in the bathroom and flush the toilet and wash our hands for this pandemic, washing our hands. But that actually is because of another pandemic, because that was the benefit of that pandemic. It showed the importance of it. So, like, you know, it's a bad thing, but you know, there's kind of good things can come out of it there.
You spoke earlier as well about the Ford factory.
Yeah, so in 1913, Henry Ford made the first assembly line, as we know it now, the factory assembly line. But it wasn't until the 1920s that all the other industrials companies and businesses started taking it on board. So therefore, there was a high influx of more jobs. Then they standardised the working hours as well, so it went down to, say, 40 hours a week or 39 hours a week. So there was more money flowing. And then
the trade union movements were
all of those things
that.
came in, protecting the workers and that type of stuff, so there wasn't as much abuse and stuff. But it was described, even though a lot of the stuff started in the States, the way it was described when I was researching different articles was, from a European perspective, it was described as a period of social, artistic, cultural and economic dynamism, vigorous activity and progress. So it wasn't just to do with this is when the art started to come in. I think you had the Art Deco movement at the same time. So therefore, creativity and stuff like that began to flow from people because their brains weren't locked in that fight, flight or freeze mode. They were just, things were a bit more calmer and they were able to develop themselves and grow.
So, and I suppose another period in history was the Renaissance. Would be kind of similar to that as well.
And that again came from the pandemic. That came from the Black Death.
Okay.
The Renaissance.
So we've discussed the emerging trends of the 1920s. What do you reckon are going to be the emerging trends of the 2020s? We've already seen the advent of Zoom meetings and online meetings. Telemedicine has become huge in the States. So talking to counsellors and talking to even general practitioners and GPs via Zoom and saying, look, I have a rash on my elbow. What do I do about that? And it's like, have you tried turning it off and on again? So, like, any other emerging trends that you see coming down the tracks?
I think that that because of the pandemic and everything like that, I think a lot of places have had to pivot their business. So I think, you know, an awful lot of people have actually had to find their way to survive during it, and that's what's exciting. Some things we don't know yet, but we'll find that there will be a lot of people who will have valued their time, in that they are not going to go back to a full-time position in a place. I mean, I was listening to one economics guy that he's living in Holland. He's Irish guy living in Holland. And one of the things he was saying is that actually, because of the things that have people have done during pandemic, of working from home, and have actually found now that it's better. For a long time, companies sure they won't do the work at home, and they've now, because of this time, found actually people are very productive at home. You don't have the travel in and out. So he was talking about, you know, that the office blocks in the city centres could become obsolete and they could be turned into apartments, and all of that will bring great growth because it will help with the housing crisis. But as well as that, it means that if inside in the city centre, people start living in the city centre, what happens is that they shop in the city centre. Wherever these apartment blocks are going to create kind of a real economic, financial area for people to develop small businesses, because now they don't have to go and stock up for the week because they're going to be working. They're going to be up in an apartment, working from home, come down and eat here, shop there, go to a cafe, buy in the local, instead of going to town to buy candles or whatever, that you go to the local shop that sells them. So actually, I think there's going to be a change in how we live, how as families, and where we shop and everything like that. So
working from home, you're saying, is going to be a massive trend going forwards. And I think as well, just added to that, the other thing that I'm seeing a lot more of is tiny homes. So people, and what are they called? They're called
Living off the grid, isn't
digital nomads.
Yeah.
Digital nomads. So people who can work from home. So let's say you have a job, you're a web designer, or you do tech support, or you do a graphic design or something like that. Then you don't have to live in Glanmire to work for a company in Cork City. You could just as easily do that from Zimbabwe while you're in the back of a tent, you know, or you're driving around Eastern Europe in a transit van that's been kitted out to be a tiny home. So you have your shower, your bed, and you can travel the world as you're working. So that life is called digital, the life of a digital nomad. And that's like the YouTube channels on just creating mini homes or mobile homes or camper vans. That niche within YouTube has exploded. So there you go. There's another trend. Any other trends that are coming out?
I think that a lot of trends will be where people will have more time to enjoy life. So you're kind of, you know, I mean,
So you're talking about the work-life balance
the
type of thing?
work-life balance will be a huge thing, I think. And I think that, you know, because, you know, some people will kind of say, oh, I can't do people. I like my own space. Suddenly have decided, actually, I took that for granted. You know, even school kids are weak to be back at school. I know that for home, we haven't even had to call ours. They're up at the dawn, can't wait to get in there. So suddenly they've got an appreciation as to what that social interaction. Now they still probably don't like homework and all the rest, but actually that social interaction, I think that socially we are going to maybe appreciate the importance of people in our lives.
Well, it comes back to the whole thing, which again is about our survival. And for the human race to survive, it needs food and water, it needs shelter from the elements, and it needs companionship, which is like a tribe, not necessarily a partnership. We need other people. You might need them every day, every minute of the day, but you do need an interaction. And when you talk about Zoom, like Zoom has been a lifesaver in many ways for many companies and many people to keep connections, stuff like that. But like there is a thing out there now called Zoom fatigue. Like people have just had enough of it, because it's like any screen time. When you're over absorbed in it for too much, it affects you then mentally, which affects you physically, do you know?
But this will be the roaring 20s. Now we won't have to do Zoom all the time, but we have learned the benefits of Zoom.
Yeah,
and
absolutely,
that's going to be the balance, like in that, like, you know, obviously I'm not a Zoom person, but it is fantastic for people, like I know for Nicole, it's going to give her an opportunity to travel the world without actually having to give up her job.
Yeah,
Which is going to be, it's going to be a fantastic.
Yeah, so she can teach music lessons no matter where she is in the world.
Yeah,
absolutely. And
whereas
I think
previously you would have like even only, I mean, when I was doing grinds for school or doing music lessons, I remember the house that I had to travel to do my guitar lessons was in the centre of Blackpool, and if I couldn't get to that particular house, then my lesson was off for the week.
Yeah.
Whereas now that's just not a thing anymore.
Yeah, there's it's taught us that, like, you know, even though Zoom isn't good for everybody, it actually has given other people great opportunities. I know even for how people are connecting. Again, I'm going to speak of Nicole now with you know, when she finished her masters in music and everything, and she's teaching there now, but the people she's teaching now are worldwide. Yeah. So that's been an amazing thing for her, where before somebody did their masters and they had to kind of go off and get out into the world and get their experience, where now actually, because of Zoom and because of lockdown, people, even though all this information was there before, you could upload your video and you could upload all your content, but people didn't actually go there, where now people had no choice to do it. So now I think it's another tool that they won't lose. And
it's been a massive benefit, massive benefit in many ways, even from training perspectives and stuff like that. Like you've said, like, you know, people, there would have been other businesses shut down if they weren't able to transition over to Zoom. So even though, yes, we have lost some businesses, which is terrible and whatever, other businesses have, as you said, looked outside the box. And I think that's, from a mental health perspective, that's what we need to do as humans. We need to always keep stepping outside the box. because it keeps us active mentally, and
So the other, one more trend that just while we're on the section of listing trends, cryptocurrency.
Yes.
Cryptocurrency and the stock market. So, okay, cryptocurrency has been around for yonks, but within a crisis, this is when stockbrokers and Wall Street tycoons make their millions. But in the last couple of years, online banking services like PayPal, like Revolut, like another few in Asia that we're not familiar with, but are the equivalents of those over there. The average Joe Soap can now invest in SpaceX, or you can trade your currencies and what have you from the palm of your hand. And this has kind of given some extra life to the whole cryptocurrency infrastructure. It was kind of a fad at one point, and the economics gurus were saying, okay, this is just going to disappear. It's not sustainable. It can't work. We're not so sure this year. There's an awful lot of huge companies after investing into Bitcoin. Elon Musk put $1.5 billion into Bitcoin in, I think it was February, and then the price jumped by 10,000 in the following week, and then everybody got into it. And then Ethereum, and you've got loads of different types of, so cryptocurrency may end up becoming more mainstream. In fact, in Apple stores now worldwide, you can actually go and buy your new Apple iPhone. You can walk in with a Bitcoin wallet and exchange your Bitcoin and walk out with an Apple phone.
That's unreal, isn't it?
So that's a whole thing. You want to keep a very close eye on things like that. Like I don't know enough about it. Maybe that's another episode that we can maybe plan in the future. But again, the lessons that we have to learn from the 1920s is that those who adapt and follow the trends are going to come out better in the long run. If you bury your head in the sand and say, oh, I don't know anything about computers, so I'm not going to get involved in computers, it's not going anywhere. You're going to get left behind. And I think cryptocurrency could be something that
was a fabulous podcast that I listened to this week, and it was touching on that sort of thing now about being left behind, because what happened in the last year to everybody actually happened in the music business back when Spotify and downloading, that the CDs and the copyright, that copyright. And what happened is that the music business lost 10 years of huge money, and 10 years is a lot of time fighting the demand that was there, instead of embracing it and kind of saying, okay.
So they were trying to push back the tide.
They were trying to push it back. They lost 10 years financially everywhere, and then they had to comply. And now suddenly, with this lockdown, that's what saved some of the music business this time round, being able to get it up there and all the rest. Because people think that you put up it was interesting because it was David McWilliams' podcast. And what was interesting about it is it was funny because I find him an absolutely incredible listen to for economics and everything. And he was doing this podcast yesterday, and it was really funny because his daughter is an upcoming musician who has written music. So here he is, and he's balancing on the side, and he brought on a great guy who has a book out called Tarzan Economics, and it's about, again, now it's a great book because it's describing, imagine Tarzan swinging through and when to jump from vine to what vine. So this was how you were going to survive, and it's probably the book for everybody to get for the Roaring 20s, because it's like when to let go and catch the next vine. And it was really interesting. So what the other part that was interesting about the podcast was that he was saying, my daughter, she's written this song, and 20 years ago, the artist would write the song and they would release an album, and then they'd make all this loads and loads of money. And now it's kind of a case of that when they do it, they upload it and they get a small percentage. So they might kind of get a few thousand as opposed to the 10,000 for a record deal. And he was probably kind of saying, oh, my daughter, whatever, and trying to keep his economic head on. And the conversation was so interesting, because then it realized that, like, okay, only getting that, but imagine everything she brings out now is going to bring that in. She's not going to be waiting for sales. Like, you had actually, we'll say, the 100 records sold on the first day, but you can't resell those. Where the uploads, she'd have to bring out a whole new record to get that volume of money in again. Where now, actually, it's just one song, 2 songs, and when it's going up her, because of social media and Spotify and the new trend, it has actually broadened her market to keep it building nicely all the time, no matter what she puts out there. So it was a great one, but definitely I can't wait to get the book, Tarzan Economics, because that sounded really cool. I loved the idea of swinging through all these economic paths ahead.
So we've kind of listed out a good few trends there, and emerging trends that will possibly happen within the 21st century. The negative trends in the 1920s, we briefly touched on the rise of fascism, right-wing extremism, cultural division, racism in the US with the rise of the Ku Klux Klan. In the 2020s, we also have an emerging kind of divide between right and left-wing politics. So we have a sort of fascism, not really fascism, it's more like a nationalism. So you've got Brexit, and you've got the America First type of thing. You've got the vaccine nationalism, where countries are starting to look after their own. It's not a kind of a global community, it's a kind of like, oh, we'll look after our own first. That's become stronger in the last couple of years. It's been heightened by the pandemic. But then you've got the opposite end of the extreme, where you have the extremists on the left wing. So we have the Black Lives Matter, and then the whole in the States you have Antifa. We spoke about just before we came on the podcast about how Portland in Oregon is just being ransacked by Antifa protests, and this is disguised under a veil of we're fighting for freedoms and we're fighting for civil rights. But at the same time, they're destroying local businesses by smashing the windows and looting and robbing and burning things. So, and now we have up north in Northern Ireland, we have the resurgence of the Troubles because of the Brexit movement, and now what are we going to do with Ireland and Northern Ireland? We've got Russia moving into the Ukraine, trying to capture back. There's a lot of tension in the air. So how are we going to avoid all this? We kind of spoke a little bit earlier there, Jimmy, just from a kind of a psychological point of view about empathy, compassion, and how can we avoid jumping onto team right or team left and adding to the global tension of difference and division. How can we kind of pull the community back together? Are there tools? Are there tricks? What are we going to do?
So again, it comes back to what's going on in the brain, and on one of the articles that I was looking at when I was doing research, they were saying that the media back in the 1920s moved away from the hardships and from the war and began focusing on celebrities and sporting heroes and positive stuff, yeah? Mm-hmm. But in this day and age, the media doesn't do that. The media stays on the negative. So from a brain perspective, if you're exposed constantly to something that's, whether it be left or right or whatever it is, and that's what your social media and your attention span is drawn into, it's going to create its own. It's like following the like the herd of sheep following the sheep or following the cow or whatever it is. You'll just follow it and follow it and follow it because your brain is activated into that mode. So it's like the default mode of our brains is negative. It's that's where it goes first. And you're not going to change that until you work on yourself. And you have to work on yourself and look at, it's not as simple. There's no simple exercises because it's very deep. You have to look at your values, your morals, your cultural upbringing and stuff like that. And you have to bring in the likes of compassion and self-compassion and gratitude and love. Stuff that like we don't normally speak about because it can be fluffy or whatever way people want to look at it. But it's what makes you up. Like intrinsically inside ourselves, we all have compassion and self-compassion and love. It's there. It's always been in us. What happens is whatever we're influenced by from a mental perspective, as in how we're brought up and stuff like that, that affects then how we're going to react. So we're effectively in what we would call instant reaction mode all the time, rather than being able to step back. And I think you mentioned earlier on when we were talking about just before the podcast, and I was telling you about the book Difficult Conversations, where you have to look at everything from a third person's perspective. And that's what it's about. It's about, okay, what's put in front of me? What are my feelings on it? What are their feelings on it? What would somebody without an impartial bias look at it? How would they look at it? And then deciding, okay, what is it that I feel I need to do in the realms of my morals and my values and my compassion and love and gratitude and stuff like that,
Yeah. Well, so that's something that I heard on another podcast being referred to as the principle of charity. It's a logical fallacy and a reasoning tool to help you get into the mindset of somebody else. Because sometimes when somebody has such a deep-seated belief system that's different to yours, you're not going to convince them by showing them the latest stats and figures. It's just not going to happen. You can talk to somebody about climate change and show them the hockey stick graph, and you can show them pictures of ice caps melting, and if their deep-seated culture says no, this is all going to swing back the other way in another 50 years, it's always been happening, you're not going to disprove their reasoning by showing them facts and figures. You have to find common ground. And you know who's very, very good at this? If anybody is interested in podcast, is Sam Harris. Sam Harris is a huge figure in the world of podcasts, in the world of meditation and mindfulness, in the world of logical reasoning, in the world of philosophy. And if you listen to the start of every single one of his podcasts, the first 5 to 10 minutes is establishing common ground. He could have on somebody that he fundamentally disagrees with, possibly loads, possibly can't stand the smell, the sight, the look of them, and yet the first 10 minutes of every conversation is, okay, what is it that we agree on? Where is the common ground? And then the next thing you do is you take the time to make sure that you're representing the other person correctly, and make sure that they're representing you correctly. So, in other words, if my belief system is A and your belief system is B, I don't accuse you of believing in C. So I don't create a straw man to argue against, and we start going down a personal path of, oh, well, I didn't say that and you said that. So immediately, so this is the tactics of being able to step into somebody else's shoes, give them the benefit of the doubt, start off on the right foot, and then have a conversation. And it has to be a conversation, not a shouting match, not a one-upmanship, not a competition, not a pissing on the wall match. This is all about having conversations. So, with that in mind, let's bring it right back down to Ireland. What are the cultural divisions that we've seen in the last 3 to 4 years, specifically during the pandemic? Is there something now that's a cultural division that wasn't there 3 years ago?
Well, I find that I'm going to go to the pandemic itself.
Yep.
We'll say a simple thing of essential and non-essential.
Yep.
It has become really, really a kind of the people who go into the essential bracket, almost an air of hierarchy.
Yeah, there's a class system to it.
Yeah, and then the non-essential, a bit of of being made belittled, because like, you know,
They've got a chip on their shoulder.
yeah, because I mean, you know, like I think that we all feel that what we do is essential. Doesn't matter what you do in life, and actually, it is. It is. It's very essential, and you know, I think that was probably, that's one of the things that will kind of create, like even during the pandemic, where I had seen kind of people, it was Paul Byrne and Drogheda saying, kind of making a post of saying, you know, I think that anybody whose job puts food on the table for their family is deemed essential. And it wasn't, you know, I mean, that's a very
That's a
real,
reasonable point, yeah.
it's a very reasonable point. Now, so I suppose that's going to be a work of rewording that a bit better, because, like, I mean, it was you know, I'm not sure. Like, I mean, I do understand the idea of the lockdown and what was deemed essential and not deemed essential, but it isn't the people. It isn't. You know, the whole thing will create that bit of controversy and a bit of stigma between people going forward.
Well, I think the one that almost puts salt in the wounds is when you have people who are deemed essential, who have kept their job and their earnings for the entirety of 2020, saying things like, "Oh, well, we're all in this together."
Yeah.
That is salt in the wounds, and if you're one of those motherfuckers, cop on.
Well, that was one of my posts there recently, because, like, again, if I refer to David McWilliams, it's like some of the decisions that were made, or some of the opinions that are formed, are based on people who have no skin in the game. That they haven't had to shut down their business. They haven't done you know, some of the things that other people have done. So my quote on that was like, yeah, we're all in the same storm, but we're not actually in the same boat. You know, some of us are paddling in a freaking canoe, where others are in one of the cruise liners going along there. And that isn't anybody's fault. That I am, like, from a person who was in the canoe looking up at the fellas inside the cruise liner. I don't actually feel that it's their fault. I am. Anybody who has said to me, and I'm sure people can have heard it from me, when I'd say, "Were you working during this pandemic?" Yes, I'm delighted. I'm absolutely thrilled, because thankfully that's what we need to look at to sort out this non-essential and who was in the boat and in it together, because the tide will turn, and suddenly the people who get off the cruise liner are going to be able to come onto our business and spend what they have earned during the pandemic. And so they are necessary, but they're huge. We need not to kind of cut off our nose to spite our face, and realise that they're the ones who are going to get us back, and they're going to help us to enjoy the roaring 20s. So it is a bit of being grateful, being delighted that somebody is able to do it. I think, you know, like, that's what is so exciting about the roaring 20s, because even, you know, people that people have saved, people have actually you know, will have huge spending consumer power. They will have been craved of things that they now realize were really helping them through this, and then they're going to invest in that, and hopefully then when the tide rises, that it doesn't matter what you're in, we're all rising. Canoe, everything is going to rise with the tide.
And we've got to be a little bit thankful as well, like, just speaking from the Irish perspective here. Again, coming off of the roaring 20s of the 1920s, there was the creation of the welfare systems in Europe. It's not just Ireland, this is in Europe. That didn't happen in the States. So in 2020, any of the businesses that shut down in the States, they didn't get a pandemic unemployment payment that we got in Ireland. Now, it wasn't much, but it meant that nobody was starving You know, there was nobody in Ireland that suddenly starved to death. You know, whereas in other countries, we're talking about like India right now is going through a pretty tough time. But during the first lockdown, they didn't do a lockdown because they just couldn't. You can't just shut down your business and then eat nothing. That's not going to happen. So I mean, for those of us that did have to shut down business, we have to be somewhat thankful that we did have some sort of a welfare system that did pick up a bit of slack. Might not have given us a cruise liner, but it gave us a canoe. As well, let's stick with the metaphors. But you also spoke as well just before we came on air, Mar, about how you were thankful that it wasn't the 1840s.
Yeah, I had an moment, we'll call it, and I thought, you know, back to the famine in Ireland. And you know, and you know, here we are now, and we're all kind of saying, "Oh my God, the year." And I'm saying myself now. I'm not saying everybody. I'm actually putting myself in this because, like, this year has been horrendous for our business. We haven't got, you know, huge supports from the government, but we're very grateful because we've had a nice tribe who've come in and helped us out, and you know, and we've you know, we've done everything to keep all our bills paid, and we've found our own ways of trying to make it happen, and you know, so like where I suppose what we're hoping is that we're in a good state to go into the Roaring 20s. But the moment for me yesterday was like, you know, lockdown, we'll be going to another lockdown, blah, blah. And then I thought, imagine being back in the famine. And suddenly your potato crop is destroyed by blight. And because that happens, you are starving. You have nothing to either sell to buy food or grow to eat. It's not happening. And then year 2, exact same thing happens. And that goes on for 5 years. So like, you know, but that was people actually dying. There was, you know, it got over it like you know, that we'll say even in the lockdown you'd find that we'll say the first lockdown everybody kind of mustered together a bit stronger and tried to help as many people as possible. The second lockdown, not so much. The third one, sure, you know, everybody kind of, you know, there isn't anybody really thinking of each other to the same extent. So can you imagine 5 years of that in Ireland?
We've only had 1 year.
We've only had one.
And we could eat.
Yeah.
And we had Amazon and
we had
Zoom.
Yeah, imagine, like, you know, I suppose, like, you know, I was laughing because, you know, the way all the years they were giving out like that our prison system is so easy, like that they're in, you know, they're inside there and they have their food and they have warmth and they have their Sky TV. I think this year now, maybe we might kind of think actually that wasn't that much. That's not what life was all about. So actually the prison system is quite hard because they're missing out on, we suddenly realise what actually life is about and what really, really matters. So the Sky TV doesn't matter. Your belly full, that's okay. But your choice of food matters. Your right to go where you like matters. So now I think we will look at our prison system and kind of think, actually, maybe not. I might prefer not to be in there.
So look, we've kind of danced around lots of different topics around the Roaring 20s, what it was, what it can be, what it will be. Go on.
I'm going to talk about, you know, just like economically, light at the end of the tunnel, Roaring 20s to me, is that there has been a year that everybody has got to save. Everybody has got, you know, like, it's not like even the 1920s when people came out and it was war, destitution, and then going straight into a pandemic. And imagine they did all of that. They had it 100 times worse than us. And look, they got the Roaring 20s. So now we need to look and we need to say, we've learned from the Roaring 20s. we've seen everything on the Roaring Twenties, and then what's after happening now is that we actually are financially in a better state because the government has borrowed everything. The world has got together, and the government has borrowed money at 0%. And it is even when businesses and everybody gets out of this pandemic, the government will continue to support different areas right through probably to the end of the year. So this is a great chance. It's not a bad thing. And like when we come out, we just need to be ready to embrace that economic upward trend, because it is coming. It is coming.
We normally do top tips, but this is not really a top tip type of topic. Jesus Christ. Did I just say that?
Say it again.
I can't. I think I just sprayed my tongue. So we, instead of top tips, we have 3 challenges. So each of us is going to give you a little bit of a challenge that maybe will help position you or your community or your family a little bit better to avail of the Roaring Twenties. So Mar, yours was about, do you remember what it was?
Yeah, I do, because I'm very passionate about it. It's about shopping local. It's about helping small local businesses, because this pandemic to me has been, I suppose, kind of made me appreciate people who have worked really hard to keep their businesses floating. They have tried everything, and I have been in awe of some of the businesses that I have been watching on buying or from and everything, and I've tried my best to support. And I'm going to give a shout out to like the Therapy Boutique there in Middleton. I'm going to give a shout out to Michelle, that lovely girl in Marks and Spencer's. I'm going to give a shout out to Horgan's in Blarney, who have all of these people and much more have gone out of their way during this pandemic to provide services to us. I mean, Horgan's deliver it to my door. You know, I bought something in Therapy Boutique, and Fanula, she sent a bouquet of flowers to thank me, because these businesses are really the heart of our country, the heart of our towns and villages. They're where our kids and they're gonna be there for, if it's to do with martial arts. These are going to be the businesses that are probably going to sponsor athletes. These are the businesses that are going to give jobs, summer jobs or work experience to everybody. And they have, so it's really important that we don't forget that. We remember during pandemic who worked hard and get to those local businesses and work. I'm part of the Blarney Business Chamber, and like we work every week. And I mean, even during the pandemic, there were people in the Blarney Chamber who were doing okay because they were busy. And I don't think there was 1 week that one of them didn't ring me or ask how they could help me. They gave a shout out, met me for a cup of tea, or did a Zoom call to kind of cheer me up, because we were closed and how we were finding it so tough. And now it's about giving back, and local businesses are really need our support. So like we'll say in the chamber there now this weekend, Corinne, she does beautiful food and everything, and she had an online cookery course. It cost €10. I mean, that's all I had to do to support her was pay €10. And if we could actually look at what we can do for our businesses, because they're the ones who've suffered. And like I said earlier, when that tide comes up, all ships come up, whether you're in the paddle boat, whether you're in the cruise liner, we'll all start coming up together. But we should always look local. How can we help each other? Because that's where our business, each of us, are 70% of companies in Ireland is local, is small entrepreneurship. And that's so I'm urging everybody to think, how can you help somebody locally in any little form at all to get us all back there?
So that's challenge number 1 is shop local, and that's from the gym mama, so you better fucking do it. My one is more about kind of tactically positioning yourself to catch the wave, because this is coming, whether you believe in it or not, it's happening, right? It like once the world opens up, we're seeing it all over the States right now. They're practically open. Most of Asia is open. The Middle East is open, and you've got events happening. You've got you've just got lots of things happening, and you can see just a tidal wave of activity. There's people going to be spending money. There's people going to be investing. There's people going to be buying stuff, buying houses, investing in this, that, and the other. And tactically, we've each got a responsibility to ourselves to position ourselves to make sure that you can catch that wave. So are you in a line of work that you can benefit from something that's coming down the track? Some of those trends that we highlighted a little bit earlier that are emerging within the 2020s. Are you in there in a position that can benefit from that? Do you have cryptocurrency? Do you know what it's all about? Have you got a way of working online? Have you got, is your job going to become obsolete because people now are going to work from home? So therefore, if you have apartments in the city, maybe you can't, or office space in the city, maybe you can't rent it out anymore. Do you have to pivot and turn it into something else so that you will guarantee your income or something like that? Each of it's impossible it's not a one size fits all type of solution, but each and every single one of us can now take a kind of a look at our current list of qualifications or jobs or whatever we do on a daily basis, and check, is that 2020 proof? And if it isn't, is there a small change that I could make that would position me just a little bit better? So that's my challenge, is just have a quick overview, just do a bit of an audit on yourself and ask yourself honestly, and just ask yourself honestly and answer yourself honestly. And if you're talking to yourself, you might want to see Jimmy. But the question is,
yourself back.
That's it, yeah. But the question is, are you in a position to catch the wave that's coming? And if you're not, can you change and pivot to make sure that happens? And just on that, we do have an episode on pivoting coming up, so make sure you stay tuned and subscribe and all that good stuff. So that's my challenge. Number 3 is Jimmy's challenge. So Jimmy, what have you got for us?
So I have 2. And one of them is, where they're both basically connected to what you were saying about you have a responsibility to yourself. So the first one is self-care. Obviously, over this time, everybody's been able to take a look at themselves in many different ways. So I think it's about recognizing in this past year or so, what are the things that you actually enjoyed or got benefit out of in regards to your time for you, and remembering that when we open up again, there is going to be this want to go out there and start giving yourself to everybody, but you're going to have to still put in time and reserve time for self-care for yourself. That's number 1. The second one is we're going to put a link up to a self-assessment in regards to mental health, which is the assessment that is being used is used throughout all our medical community throughout the world. It's called the K10, and just take it, see what your results are, and no matter what they are, if it means that you need to talk to somebody, then like Mara said, look locally and reach out to somebody locally in the field of mental health that might be able to help you, and don't be afraid of it. It's not a scary thing. I think if anything, what we're always promoting good mental health. It's okay to not be okay and all that type of stuff, and that's all grand, but only if you do something about it. If you don't do something about it, that's where the challenge is. That's when we face challenges and when we find difficult situations that we can't get out of sometimes. So just be honest with yourself, be real, take it, see what it comes out with, and whatever the results say to you, take some action.
So there's a survey that they can download on on our,
To
on
be
our
able to-
Yeah, so it'll
on
be in the show notes. Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they'd fill that out and it just
Done
answer the
automatically.
question.
It's an automatic one. It's
Yeah.
based from Australia, but the sheet that's used is
You just turned the sheet upside down.
the sheet that's used, or the assessments that's used, is worldwide used anyway, in our profession, and it just gives you a guideline of, okay, I could be struggling here, this is what you need to do. It gives you an instruction of what you need to do.
Yeah.
So there you go. You have 3 different challenges this week, and it is for the week, but it's something that you could do maybe for the rest of the year. So number 1, shop local and help your community, because they will help you. Number 2, do an audit and position yourself. Ask yourself, are you positioned to avail of the next decade, or do you need to pivot? So position yourself to catch the wave. That's my challenge, and that's just kind of sit down and have a chat with yourself and make a few notes. Maybe make up a business plan for yourself. And then number 3 is the mental checkup with James White of API Clinics. So in the show notes, you will see links to that K10 questionnaire, and it's not something that you have to share, but it will certainly help if you can take a snapshot of where your mental health is right now, and maybe it will spur you to take some action that will be positively beneficial to you. Mar, have we got a quote of the week?
We have indeed, and this quote of the week is going to be really funny because it's from a guy called Dave Hollis. And what was funny is that when I went to the Wikipedia to see who he was, his first claim to fame is that he's an ex-husband of Rachel Hollis, which I thought was hilarious. I don't know what Rachel Hollis does, but she must be some woman to say that she could get have that accredited to her husband, because actually he is an author himself, like in his own right, and he actually does a good book called The Skeptic's Guide to Growth and Fulfillment, so a bit in line with what we're talking about today, I suppose. So the quote of today from the Gym Mama: in the rush to get back to normal, use this time to decide which parts of normal are worth rushing back to.
I was just going to let that kind of fester there for a second. Hang on.
Oh my God, therapeutic.
Katie Cody is always in the studio with us.
So there you go, folks. That has been our kind of rendition of the Roaring Twenties. We've given you a bit of an overview of 100 years ago, maybe the trends that emerged, the trends that possibly will emerge in this decade, in this century, and a couple of challenges that you can take up and maybe challenge a few of your friends to take them with you. Hopefully you've enjoyed it. In the meantime, take care of yourselves. And this has been the Fight Coach, the Psychotherapist, and the Gym Mama.